what can you do with Play-Doh? Somebody. Allie?
You can make a dog.
You can make a dog out of it. It's weird. No, I don't know. I'm not very good at
I
this.
make things I regret.
Have any of you ever made a dog out of Play-Doh? Mr. Brzezinski? What else can you do with Play-Doh? What else can you make? Why?
A tiger. I tried it.
A tiger.
Yeah, I tried it.
I don't know if I have enough here for a tiger.
I don't even know use that.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know what's it.
Can you pretty much shape this into whatever you want?
Pretty much unless it's tiny.
I think
Unless
you
it's
can
tiny.
make bubbles.
What can you do if it's tiny? If it's bigger?
Yeah. Okay. So, got a question for you. It's a silly question. I or you can put this into whatever shape you want it to, right?
Yes.
Have you ever been playing with Play-Doh and heard a little voice that said, "Stop moving me around. I don't want to be shaped into a dog." And did Play-Doh ever talk to you? Don't shape me into a dog. I want to be a tiger. No? Don't shape me into a cookie. I want to be a hamburger.
What about it?
I don't want to be a pizza. I want to be lasagna. Right? The Play-Doh doesn't talk back, does it? You know, it doesn't talk back. If it did, I know, it would be kind of odd. It would be weird. It would be strange, wouldn't it?
I would strangle it.
So keep that thought in your mind. Because the Bible tells us that God is like a potter. He's like the person that shapes the clay into different things. He shapes, a potter shapes clay into a cup, or into a pot, or into a plate. And the potter can shape the clay into whatever he wants it to be shaped into, doesn't he? Just like we can shape this Play-Doh into whatever we want, God can shape the clay, the potter can shape the clay into whatever he wants. And the clay doesn't talk back. But when the Bible talks about God being a potter, guess who he says, guess what he says is the clay. When God is the potter, what is the clay? It's not sin. If God is the potter, the shaper, if God is the shaper, what or who is getting shaped?
Oh, us.
Us. That's right. Now, when we look at the Play-Doh, or the potter looks at the clay can't talk back, can it? But can we talk back? We can. God made us with a spirit. And so when God tries to shape our lives, we can resist that. The Play-Doh, it doesn't resist. It just does whatever, however I push it. But when God shapes our lives, we can resist it. Should we resist it? No, because who is smarter than anyone else in the whole wide world? God is, because he made the whole wide world. Who is wiser? Who is more powerful? Who can figure everything out and make everything work out the way he wants it to? God. So, God, Kelly, God puts things into our lives. He does. Because he's trying to shape us into someone that he has a special plan for every single one of us. He wants every single one of us to end up doing a particular thing for him. And we might end up doing that, but we might not. If we do what God wants, if we obey him, then we'll end up doing what he wants, what he shapes us for. But if we resist, we say, I don't want to do what God wants, I want to do what I want, then we won't be able to do the wonderful things that God has planned for us. So, I'm going to tell you today about a man and God in a special way. We can see, the Bible tells us about so many things that God put into his life, but just because he did it for him doesn't mean he's not putting special things into every single one of our lives. God had chosen this man, and then to do a special thing for him, and then he put things into his life to prepare him. So at one time, a long, long time ago, the people of God were in bondage and slavery. When they got up in the morning, they had to go work for somebody else, and they didn't have any choice about who they worked for, when they worked, how long they worked, how hard they worked, what they worked with. They had to do what the taskmasters and what the king said. They were slaves. They were slaves in Egypt. And in Egypt, talking about clay, they had to take dirt and mix it with water, turn it into bricks, and build cities out of bricks. Cities. Buildings, streets, walls, fortresses out of bricks that they made out of the clay. And that was hard work, but they didn't have any choice. They had to do whatever the taskmasters told them to do. They were God's people. They had been promised. Abraham had been promised, and Isaac and Jacob had been promised that they would live in Canaan, a land away from there, not where they were living. But could they leave and just go to Canaan whenever they wanted to? No, they were slaves. There was many people there. Some were not, but some people prayed and believed God. And this family, this man and his wife, they believed God, and God sent them a son right at the time when he wanted to. This son, God had a plan. He had already planned this, but he said, I'm going to deliver my people from bondage, and I'm going to use a man to do it. And so God had this boy to be born. Now I want to just stop there. God had you born as a boy or as a girl. God did that. God said you were a boy, and so he had you born as a boy. God created you to be a lady or a woman, and so he had you born as a girl. Can a boy that's born talk back to God and say, you made a mistake? Really, I'm a girl. No. Can a girl, born as a girl, God created her as a girl, talk back to God and said, you made a mistake? Really, I'm a boy. No. Now, the world today thinks you can do that, and with surgeries and stuff like that, they try to fight against God and change the way they were made. But you can't change the way you're made. God made you that way. And God made this boy a boy, and God had him born into a home that loved him. But because they were in slavery, the king had made a decree that all the boys that would be born should be killed. Is that right? No, that's not right. But the king said all the boys should be killed. But these people, this man and his wife, they were godly. They were a godly family. And they knew that killing babies was not what God wanted. It was against his law. It was a sin. And so they didn't kill their baby. They didn't turn him over to the government. But they did have to hide him. And after a while, it was hard to hide their baby. Why? Some of you are too young. You didn't have a baby in your home. But what do babies do that make them hard to hide?
Cry.
They cry, right? They make noises. They yell and scream. They don't know why. Well, they know why, but we don't know why, because they can't tell us. But they cry and they yell and scream. So the time came when they had to hide their baby and trust God to protect him. So they put him in a river in a little boat, a little wicker basket that was sealed, no water could get into it, and they put the baby into the boat, and they put him in a place where
Hurt.
he would be found. Because they didn't want him to starve to death. So, not long after they put him in the river, in the tall grass on the side of the river, the princess came by. Now who's the princess?
The government.
The government's daughter, the king's daughter. The princess came by, and she looked and she saw something in there, and she went to look at it, and when she looked inside, what did she see? The baby boy, right? And her heart went, oh, he's so cute, or something like that. And she thought, this is one of the slave's children. But he doesn't deserve to die. Maybe I can keep him for myself. And so, she did. Now the baby's sister was close at hand, and the baby's sister said, I can find you one of the slave moms, and she can take care of him until he grows up a little bit bigger. And so that's what happened. Who planned for all these things to happen to that little baby? God did, didn't he? God planned for him to be born as a boy. God planned for him to be born into a home that loved him. God planned for the princess to walk by right at the time when she would see him. God put it in the princess's heart to be tender and caring toward the little baby boy that wasn't supposed to be able to live. And God made it so that the princess would let baby Moses, right? Baby Moses stay with his mom. Because that's what the sister did. The sister brought the baby back to his mom. And so baby Moses was able to be reared as a little baby in his own home, a home that loved God. Now what do you think Moses' mom did? Each day she cared for him, she fed him, she talked to him, she probably sang to him, she talked to him about all the promises that God had already given them. God had promised their ancestor Abraham that they were going to live in Canaan. God had told their ancestor Abraham that they would live as foreigners for 400 years and even be under oppression. But it was close to the end of 400 years, and Moses' mom told him everything about God and everything that God had told his people. And so Moses knew about God. But the day came, right? The day came when Moses had to be handed over to the princess. And now his life changed completely, didn't it? God put him in a godly home, had him be born, and now God put him in the king's house. Right? Pretty much. He lived his early days as the son of a slave that wasn't supposed to even live. And now he's living like the grandson of the king that wanted him to be killed. Who could do something like that? God. God orchestrated that. God made it so that Moses was able to live in the palace with his adoptive mother, his grandfather being the king. And what do you think happened there? Do you think he ate the same food every day? I think he probably ate fancy food. Do you think he wore the same old coat every single day? No, he had nice clothes now, didn't he? When he wanted to go out on the river and fish, you think he just tied some sticks together and made himself a homemade raft? No. He went in the king's golden boat, didn't he? Cast his fishing rod or whatever he did. His life was totally different. Do you think he learned about God there? No, he didn't. He didn't learn about God. In fact, his adoptive mother worshipped idols. These idols, they had eyes, but could their eyes see? No. They had ears, but could those idols hear the prayers of his adoptive adoptive mother? No. The idols had hands. But could the idols go out and do anything? No. Could God do stuff? Oh yes, God put Moses in that home, didn't he? But, you know what else changed for Moses? He started learning about everything that the Egyptians knew. Like you learn things at school. The Egyptians knew about agriculture. They knew about irrigation. They knew about building huge pyramids. So they knew, look at him, he's learning his geometry and probably some algebra, maybe some calculus. He got the best education that the whole world had. It's like going to the smartest, greatest school in the world. God put Moses in that school because God wanted Moses to know lots of things. Someday, he was going to have Moses do some things for him that he needed. Moses learned words. He learned the Egyptian language and how to write it out, and I think he learned the new shorthand Egyptian, we'll call it, that had just a certain number of letters that represented sounds. We call it an alphabet. He learned that. I know he learned it because he used it. He wrote things much later. But in Egypt, he learned to use words. He was very powerful with words. We don't know if he was a great speaker or if he just wrote the best laws. His laws were clear, and everybody understood them, and so everyone would obey them. I don't know, but I know later on he wrote laws. And so God put Moses in the palace because he needed him to learn that. He put him in a school where he would learn that. And as he grew older, God let him learn to have responsibilities. Here's Moses. He's leading some Egyptian soldiers down into battle. And he learned there to lead people and to fight against the enemies. Now I think while he was doing that, he started to think, I can lead all these soldiers, but everybody that I'm really related to are slaves. Maybe someday I can lead them out of Egypt. You think he thought that?
Yeah.
I think he did. But God put him here so he could learn to lead, so he could learn to command people and organize lots and lots of people. And so Moses got to be 40 years old. You think it's time now? Moses is 40 years old. You think it's time now for God's plan to go into motion so Moses can lead the people of his people out of Egypt? Well, that's what we would think, and that's what Moses thought. One day, Moses was back around his people, and he went looking, and what do you think he saw? What were everybody he grew up with, what were they? They were slaves. And so what did they have to do? They had to work hard. And if they did anything, could they complain if their taskmaster beat them for working hard?
No.
No. Could they complain if their taskmaster beat them for not working hard? No. They couldn't complain. They were the slaves. And so one day, the taskmaster was beating some of his Hebrew relatives, people, and Moses thought, that's not right. In fact, Moses, when he studied in Egypt, he learned what's right, what's wrong. He learned about laws. And in his mind and his heart, he said, that's not right. That man is beating those Hebrews for no good reason. And he went and he punched them, or he hit them. I don't know what he did exactly. He hit them really hard and said, that's not right. But you know what happened? The man that he hit never got up again. He killed him. I don't know if he meant to kill him or not. I think he just thought, this has got to stop. It's not right. But he hit him so hard that the man died. So Moses thought, okay, well, what am I going to do? He is a very important man. He's the grandson of the king. So I thought, I can just bury him. So he dug a quick hole, buried him in the sand, and he went home. Well, the next day, he went out and he was looking, and there was two of his people, two Hebrew men, and they were fighting with each other. I don't know, they got upset about something, and they were fighting, and Moses came up to them and said, hey guys, you guys are both Hebrews. You shouldn't be fighting with one another. And is that true? That's true. Moses knew. He knew right and wrong, and he said, you guys shouldn't be fighting with one another. And one of them said, oh, look at you, Mr. Prince. You're some kind of ruler. You think you're going to rule over us? Well, what did he think? He thought, yes, God's put me in this position so I can take all these people out of Egypt. But what did that man say? You're not going to rule over us. Are you going to kill me and bury me like you did that Egyptian yesterday? Oh. So that kind of confused Moses. He was going along doing what he thought he needed to do. It wasn't God's time. It wasn't God's time. And so the king found out, and the king was his grandfather, not really grandfather, but his grandfather was very upset. And Moses, he was confused. The Bible says he wasn't afraid of the king, but we know that he thought he was supposed to lead the children of Israel out, and they said, no, we don't want you. And the king wanted him to die, so he left. He went east. He just started hiking. I don't know if he had like a sack on a stick over his shoulder or anything like that, but he left and he went and he kept going and he kept going and he kept going until he got out of the land that Egypt, that the king controlled, all the way to the land of Midian. And in Midian, most of the people there were shepherds. But they didn't just have 20 sheep. They had lots and lots. They had whole herds of sheep. And so he sat there and he was sitting at a well, because sheep need to drink water, right? They can wander around and eat the little grass on the ground, but they need water. And so he was sitting at the well, and a whole bunch of sheep came up, and he looked, and these sheep were being tended by 7 sisters. And right when the sisters got there to start letting their sheep drink, a bunch of other shepherds came, and these shepherds were mean. And they said, you girls, you get out of the way and let our sheep drink first. And they would always push the girls out of the way, and they didn't care who was there first. They just wanted their sheep to drink first. And Moses, he said, that's not right. He had been taught right and wrong, hadn't he? His mom taught him right and wrong. The laws of Egypt, he understood their right and wrong. He said, that's not right. And he pushed those ruffian, those jerk shepherds out of the way, and he let the girls feed their sheep. And so the girls, they watered their sheep. They got their water, and the girls took their sheep home. And when the girls got home, their dad, Jethro, he said, what do you think? He was surprised, wasn't he? Because they got there so early. Every day they would get there in time to water sheep, and the other shepherds would push them out of the way. But today they were back way earlier, and he said, why are you guys here so early? And they said, well, Dad, when we went to water the sheep, there was this Egyptian man there. Now, who was the Egyptian man that they saw? Moses. He was dressed like an Egyptian, right? He was dressed like an Egyptian prince who had walked about 100 miles. And so they said there was this Egyptian man there, and he made all the other shepherds wait since we were there first and we got to water our sheep. And Dad said, where is he? He was so kind to you. Didn't you invite him for supper? And they were, I forgot. We were so happy. And so they went back, and he was still there. And so they got Moses to come to supper with them. So Moses was sitting there at supper, and I don't know how the conversation went. Probably told a little bit of who he was. And Jethro, after a couple days, Jethro said, well, why don't you watch over the sheep? And then you can just stay with us, because Moses didn't have anything. He didn't have a job. He didn't have money. All he had was the clothes on his back. So Jethro said, you work for me, and I'll feed you. And I'll let you stay here. So Moses tended Jethro's sheep. And after a while, guess what happened? Moses was there with 7 sisters. One of them, the Bible says, Zipporah, became Moses' wife. Jethro let Zipporah married Moses, and after a while they had a son, and after a little while longer they had another son. How long? So how old was Moses when he went to Midian? I said it.
40.
He was 40. Moses went to Midian and he watched sheep. You think his life was different watching the sheep? When he was in Egypt, he was going to Congress, writing laws. He was going here. He was in the chariot. He was organizing people. He was doing all this stuff. And now he's with the sheep. You think there was much going on with the sheep? No. He'd walk them out. He'd probably sit down, let the sheep eat. It was pretty quiet, wasn't it? What do you think Moses thought about? Why am I out here? I thought God prepared me to lead the children of Israel to Canaan. So did God send him out there? God brought that into his life too. It didn't make sense to him. But he listened. He still believed in God because the Bible tells us one day he saw a bush. Now the desert is hot. I've been in that desert and it's hot. And in the desert, sometimes it'll be so hot that a bush will just start on fire and disintegrate. It'll be gone. Moses was walking along and he saw a fire. And he thought, oh, it's just burning up. But then he looked and it wasn't burning up. He thought, I got to see that. So he went over to see this bush that was on fire but not burning up. And as he got close, God spoke to him. God said, Moses, take off your shoes. The place where you're standing is holy ground. And God spoke to him there from the bush. Now listen, we've got to be finished pretty soon. God said, Moses, I've heard the prayer of my people in Egypt, and I'm ready to deliver them from bondage and from slavery. And Moses was like, oh, good. I'm so glad that they're going to be out of slavery. It's so nice not having to get up every morning and be beat by whips or anything like that, because he was free. And then God said, and I'm going to use you to do it. What do you think Moses said? How can I do that? Who am I that I would be able to do that? What happened to Moses? Before he thought, I'm the guy, I'm going to lead you out of Israel, or out of Egypt, take you to Canaan. But now he says, who am I that I could do that? And God answered that question. He said, I'll be with you. And then he said, well, how will they listen to me? Who should I tell them sent me? And God said, tell the children of Israel that Jehovah sent you. I am that I am. And then Moses said, well, how will they know that you really talk to me? And God said, take that staff that you have and throw it on the ground. And you know what happened to it, right? You know this story? He threw it on the ground and it turned into a snake. And then God said, pick it up by its tail. Now we all know you don't pick up snakes by the tail, right? But that's what God said. He picked it up and it was a wooden stick, a rod again. It wasn't magic. God did that. Then God said, take your hand, put it inside your coat. He put it inside his coat and he could feel something. He said, pull it out. And when he pulled it out, his hand was covered with leprosy, which is like a really bad skin, like rash and that kind of stuff. And so he said, all right, put it back in. And put it back in, and pull it out, and it was as good as new. So God said, you show them that, they'll believe that I sent you. And then Moses said, but I'm not a good talker. Well, we don't know. The Bible says that he was good with words, so maybe he was just good with his pen. But he said, I'm not a good talker. And guess what God told him, and it's important for us to know this. Just like in the beginning I said, God made you a boy or God made you a girl. God said, when Moses said, I'm not a good talker, God said, who made your tongue? Who made your tongue? Who made your tongue? God did. And God said, who made your tongue? Oh, I could be with your tongue. And finally Moses, he really didn't want to do it. He said, can you send somebody else? And God got a little angry, but he said, yes, I will send your brother, and the two of you can do it. So God put all these things into Moses' life. And finally Moses was ready to go and do what God wanted him to do. Has God put things in your life? He has. You might not know what they are. But, because we're here today, we know God put you in Black Oak so that you could come to the Black Oak Bible Club. He did. So that you could hear, God brought you here today. You said, oh, I decided to come here. No, God brought you here today so that you could hear this lesson. So that you could be reminded of what God thinks about how He works in our lives, in each of our lives. The question is, will we try to talk back to God? Like that plate that can't talk back to God? Like that cup? Like that dough that can't talk back? Will we try to talk back, or will we submit ourselves? Will we surrender and obey God no matter what He sends into our lives? Will we live for God, whether He lets us go to one school or another school? Will we live for God? Will we obey Him and obey His word, whether we're in one home or another home? Will we look at somebody else and say, well, I would obey God if I lived there? No, God put you where you are, and He expects you to obey Him there. Doesn't matter. He expects you to do to follow His direction, to let Him shape your life. And He shapes us with His word and with the circumstances He puts into our lives and with the people that He puts in our lives. So, you should try to remember, even this week, you run into trouble and you think, why is it always trouble? Well, maybe God's trying to teach you something. Maybe He's trying to test you. Maybe He's trying to prove. Maybe He knows that you will do what's right, but He's making you prove it to yourself, that you will obey Him regardless of the situation that you're in. Sometimes things are hard. Was it hard for Moses? It was hard for Moses' parents. They were supposed to kill him, but they didn't. And then they had to put him in the river. Did they know that the princess was going to come? No, but God worked it out. And then Moses' mom got to raise him. But what did she know? Every day she knew that someday he's going to be gone. He's going to be gone. Was that fun? No, but did she just quit, or did she do what she was supposed to do? She did what she was supposed to do. And then Moses had to live away from his parents. But I think he lived for God. And then he had to leave Egypt. But he still obeyed God. And you can obey God too, in no matter what situation you're in, whether you're at church, or at home, or at school, or around town, or anywhere else you are, at Bible club, wherever you are, you can obey God. And you can know that if you obey God, God will continue to work His plan out in your life. All right. Let's remember that each day.